Welcome to History's Influence. I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to create an empire of my own to rule and expand. Perhaps I'd have to travel back in time to do so, as the modern world isn't too kind to warlords. But if I decided to give it a crack, there's one man whose writings may prove crucial, if not decisive, for success. This man would be Niccolo Machiavelli, whose reputation precedes him. Niccolo started as a popular and educated young man. From the age of 29, he held the high position of Second Chancellor of Florence, and he would primarily engage in diplomatic missions for the city-state. But due to regime change in Florence, he was later imprisoned, tortured, and exiled. Talk about a diplomatic debacle. Within this exile, he would come to write The Prince, a political treatise and guide on how to rule a state, which is also his magnum opus. The eponymous term Machiavellian refers to his unique assertion in The Prince that unscrupulous methods must often be used to acquire and maintain power. Renaissance Europe was thoroughly Christian, despite the flourishing of humanism, so these immoral ideas came as a shock when the manuscript first circulated. But what lessons can we take away from this outrageous text? Let's say you're trying to conquer an empire. You're going to be needing all the help you can get, so it'd be a great place to start. I've already got my own secret plan, so let's see what key insights can be obtained from The Prince in your own endeavour, shall we? Let's assume we're going to be starting from nothing. This is going to limit the ways in which you can first take power. Machiavelli asserts 4 broad methods in doing so. Firstly, using money or someone else's army aren't going to be applicable. Secondly, you aren't going to be chosen by other citizens to take hereditary rule. I suppose if you're the Saudi prince in waiting, you can just stop watching here. The third option of using your own forces and abilities won't be possible initially, but the core principles are worth considering. Niccolo believed that holding high ambitions will help us develop the talent and luck needed to acquire a state. Opportunities will present themselves thanks to destiny. You must remain best prepared to strike and win. It's going to be in the 4th method that we can use such tactics. We'll be establishing power through crime. You'll need to put the work in first. You'll have to have risen to a powerful enough position to take criminal actions that could actually lead you to taking power. Serving in the military or perhaps a mercenary army would work best. As for what to do next, Machiavelli presents us the example of Agathocles, king of Syracuse, from the time of ancient Rome and Carthage. Coming from a modest family, Agathocles became a soldier and would rise the ranks due to his skill. He was later able to create his own opportunity to acquire power. He invited Syracuse's senate and wealthiest citizens to a meeting. His well-earned reputation ensured that they would arrive. At the meeting, he ordered for all of them to be killed, securing power in the city for himself alone. Despite this awesome rise to dominance, he failed to maintain power, for he was too cruel and held no virtue, characteristics we will later discuss. Look, you don't want to be seen as a complete tyrant from the outset. Use cruelty for any strategy when acquiring power, crime in our case, but be quick and decisive. Don't use excessive brutality. And with those pointers, you should be able to establish a power base for yourself. But before or during your rise, you're going to need an army, both to enforce your administration and to forge an empire. You'll need to build a military from scratch to prevent old loyalties from prior armies being an issue. You should still appoint any men loyal to you during your military service into key positions within the armed forces. Don't use mercenaries, create a citizen army. Mercenaries are loyal to coin, not king. They'll betray their masters to acquire power for themselves as well. They will also shatter in the face of effective state-run armies. Take the Italian condottieri. When they came up against the French, Spanish and Swiss armies, they were hammered and Italy fell under foreign domination as a result. Niccolo also suggests against using auxiliaries. They would be foreign supplementary troops for your army. Take the example of Cesare Borgia, leader of the Romagna, a man Niccolo deeply admired and idolized in The Prince. He had these unreliable French auxiliaries, so he simply killed them. In any case, your citizen army will require strict discipline and organization. Fitness and healthy lifestyles are key for your army, but also yourself. Lay off the Doritos and Mountain Dew, it's time to get serious about this empire thing. The physical prowess of your men and yourself as leader are important, but touching grass due to your exercise can also allow you to learn the terrain of your state. You see, you should constantly be preparing for war, including in times of peace. You can practice observing locations best suited for camping, battling, sieging, etc. You can discuss potential strategies with your generals based on these scenarios you construct in your head. This will develop a unique advantage for when you face real warfare, whether it's within your terrain or even outside of it, since you'll be familiarizing yourself with different types of terrain. You also want to inspect the strengths and weaknesses of foreign armies for yourself in the meantime. Machiavelli noted the Spanish having strong infantry, but being weak to French cavalry, for example. That's enough army discussion. I believe that creates a good enough picture of how to form an effective fighting force. How about conquering and holding land? It is destiny, not the streamer, who will give you opponents to fight. These opportunities will come from ambition, as we discussed previously. You must defeat these varied enemies to move forward and achieve greatness. Hereditary monarchies, for example, require overwhelming force to defeat. If your force falters, they will just seize power again very easily. Their rule is going to be deeply entrenched. They will require overwhelming force. Centralized monarchies, with a king and his ministers, are the hardest to conquer, but easier to control afterwards. Take the Ottoman Empire, for example. This is in opposition to decentralized monarchies, with a king and their hereditary barons. It's easy to have a baron of a region defect to you, but you can't command the loyalty of the territories as they do themselves. The Kingdom of France would serve as an appropriate example for this sort of monarchy. Republics are even more difficult, with republican institutions and positions that will remain in their memory after conquest. The city of Pisa would rebel against the Republic of Florence for this reason. I suppose you could say that Pisa kept leaning away from the rule of Florence. I'm sorry. Anyway, what approaches should you take when governing the land you conquer? The risk of rebellion depends on the similarity of language, religion, and customs. We will assume our home base holds the same characteristics as our own ruling class or ourselves initially. The more alien the land, the more challenging, so the more luck would be needed to hold it. But there are a few techniques Machiavelli did suggest. Small colonies of your own people established in such regions can help assert control. They're cheap and more effective than military garrisons in their regions. For lands that were previously self-governing like republics, it's best to live there yourself. The local concerns will become your own, and the people won't wish to upset your powerful army, which would be headquartered in their land. Obviously, you can't live in all the territories you conquer. Maintaining a small local government, whose members are reliant upon you for power, as you'd appoint them or whatnot, maintains autonomy for the locals. This comes with an increased risk of rebellion, however. A more surefire strategy is to just reduce the lands to rubble. The Romans granted autonomy to Greece when they conquered it, but the rebellions would keep flaring up from key cities, so the Romans opted to just destroy these cities. The Romans perhaps needed better foresight in that case. This requires good judgment and studying your enemies and neighbours, and perhaps history. You must squash rival powers in this same way before they become potentially existential threats. The key factor for all of these techniques of conquering and holding is decisiveness. You must either pamper your new subjects or be ruthless. Half-hearted violence will be met with fierce resistance. You'll be seen as weak. It's kind of like being the teacher in a rowdy classroom. If Lady Fortuna is kind and your talent and abilities suffice, you should have established for yourself an emerging power, a cradle of what will become an empire. But you can't solely be focused on establishing a solid army, then conquering and pacifying territory. You see, a stable government must be formed, which there is nothing riskier than attempting, according to Machiavelli. The best governmental form to establish, he says, would be a centralized hereditary monarchy, with servants as ministers, not the whole hereditary barons shtick. Like your mother says, make sure you have some children, so they'll hold stable power through dynastic legitimacy. Even with subpar successes, if they only have sufficient policy to prevent disasters, the regime shouldn't collapse anyway. It's primarily through external and overwhelming force that your regime will end. But within this hereditary monarchy, how are you going to effectively deal with your subjects? Niccolo warns against generosity in matters of wealth because it won't be returned in kind. When you're required to save money and tax them higher, for a war perhaps, they're just going to see you as a greedy turncoat. If you're instead mean, taking money from the outset, but not excessively, then such an issue won't arise. They will see the genuine benefits you provide with such money in times of war, disaster, or crisis, and they'll see that you're not outright stealing from them either. But besides being a meanie in financial matters, Machiavelli asserts it is better to be feared than loved as a leader, generally speaking. You see, people get used to your love and take it for granted. They'll be unreliable in any time of need. You're not a friend, you're simply their ruler. But a ruler's punishment is something people will always fear. You have a monopoly on violence in the state. Extreme severity can actually bring peace to a region, like Cesare Borgia enforced in the squabbling region of Romagna. Remember that you are a prince, and such a role requires violent action for long-term prosperity. Don't misplace your compassion. Channel your villain energy when needed. This is not to say you shouldn't try to lessen the perception of your severity though. Borgia, for example, used his Spanish military leader, Ramiro de Lorca, to greatly pacify Romagna. He would publicly torture and execute people to inspire fear. However, later on, with trumped up charges, Cesare would execute Ramiro despite his loyal service. This meant he could reap the benefits of a pacified land, but blame the horrific acts used to achieve such an outcome on a scapegoat. Using a body of people, such as a parliament, can also prove useful. This was used in the Kingdom of France, for example. The core point here is that the truth of your actions is not relevant. It's about the image you portray. Most of your subjects will not know you firsthand. You must project a respectable character as a result, larger than life, allowing you to partake in the underhanded activities power requires. You must follow the predominant moral structure of the day, Catholicism in the case of Renaissance Italy, in which Machiavelli lived. In Niccolo's time, you'd have to be seen as compassionate, loyal, humane, honest, and religious to the best of your abilities. You must be respected, not only feared, a lesson missed by Agathocles, king of Syracuse. Show yourself to the public in shows, festivals, and in guilds and districts. Just remember to create a distinction between the ruler and the ruled. Remember to balance the different societal groupings you'd have to appeal to, particularly the peasants and nobility who hold competing interests. Whoever your enemies, conspiracies will be easily avoided if you're popular, since the incentives won't be sufficient. You should also surround yourself with wise men. Admire achievement in others, like the great patrons of the Renaissance, and give work to skilled men who deserve it, particularly the case for your advisors. Keep your advisors reliant upon you with titles and wealth, and only ask for their honest opinions regarding their areas of expertise. You don't want to be openly disrespected. So with good laws and good relations towards the peoples of your realm, you should hold a stable realm likely to form into an empire by your death, or perhaps completed by your successors. Assuming you have the talent and skills needed, with such guidance of the stages we walked through, you should be well on your way to carving your name into history. As a side note, if you don't have a time machine and carve out an empire in the present day, don't mention my name if you end up being prosecuted for war crimes. There's one concern left, however, and that would be luck. Machiavelli believes you must take action and make the world mold around you, as opposed to hoping for luck to go your way. I'll leave you with a quote to pause and read if you desire. It's a little inappropriate for me to read on YouTube, I'd say. On that interesting note, we'll be leaving it there for this video. This has been History's Influence. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Catch you later.